Welcome to the Faith Science Podcast, Episode 10. I'm your host, Jerry Swafford, and on this podcast, we explore the integration of science with faith. Today's guest is a husband, father of three, combat athlete, and former Division I strength coach. He teaches men how to stop parenting and to start leading. He has helped hundreds of men change their lives and shift their relationships with their wives and children. He is an in demand speaker and podcast guest on the topics of fatherhood and leadership, so I'm sure he'll have some advice for single guys like me. Our guest today is the leadership dad, Thomas Pfanner. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Jerry, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. What am I missing there? I'm actually kind of curious about the combat athlete part. I don't know what that is exactly.
I compete in jiu-jitsu. When I was younger, I did MMA, like full contact, and I got to the point where the headaches after training were getting a little more consistent and intense. So I dropped the striking, and for the most part, I still do some striking with my son, who's he's really into it. He's almost 17 now, but for the most part, I just compete in the grappling.
Okay. I think I might have seen like a YouTube short about that where you're like doing that with your son. So that's what so MMA like mixed martial arts type stuff is that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
All right.
submission wrestling or jiu-jitsu is basically if you think if you're watching a UFC fight and you just took the striking out, you can only just do takedowns, submissions, arm locks, chokes, all that's game. You're just not getting hit in the face.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because that seems like that would were the headaches because of getting hit? Is that
Yeah, it's just probably some ego to like getting hit and keep going. Now, like if you talk to fighters now, they do a lot less sparring than what they did 10 or 15 years ago. It was a lot more of like, hey, let's get in the gym and brawl and get used to fighting. And now it's a lot more technical. And yeah, they still do some sparring, but it's the volume of sparring is significantly down because they know that the damage really doesn't come from the 15-minute fights. It comes from the 8-week camps. If you're sparring hard 3 days a week for an hour, that's going to add up a lot faster.
okay? Yeah, that makes sense. So you were also a Division I strength coach. So is that football? Is that or some other
Yeah,
sport?
I was Division II with Western Oregon, and then I moved up with the Oregon Ducks football program, and I was an intern there for the season. So it was a blast to be able to see, the Coach Feld and Mario Cristobal were both descendants of the Alabama program
Okay.
and Nick Saban. So kind of getting into that tree and attention to detail and high standards was a really powerful experience as well.
Okay. So now you are the leadership dad. So that is kind of different than kind of these really athletic based endeavors. So what's
Yes.
the story of going from, because I would assume you probably did some sports and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. How do you get to why are you so passionate about this? What's the story that gets you to being the leadership dad now?
Great question.
Yeah.
So the sports actually, it's some of the traits that I mentioned of having attention to detail and high expectations and all those things were what led to a disconnect with me and my son when he was 15. Well, he was 14. So his 7th grade year, his mom moved away and he wanted to stay in town with me, which was great. Me and my wife, and at the time, our daughter Maddie was 2. And he lived with us for 9 months. I coached his football team. I thought things were going all right. But in January, after about 9 months of living with me, he one day said, "Dad, I'm over it. I'm tired of being controlled. I'm tired of feeling like I'm just doing exactly what you want me to do. And I'm going to move to Redmond with my mom." Which is just so Redmond, Oregon. It's a small town in Oregon. It's about 2.5 hours from Eugene, where we were. So he moved there with her this is all in the course of a court battle as well, as far as because when she moved, it changed because we were at 50-50 and I was going to be his full custodial parent the way things were going. And then after we went to court, there's an agreement that if I moved to Redmond, I could have all the contingencies that I was looking for, 50-50 parenting time, no child support, if I made the move to Redmond. So I went through the journey after Charles rebelled of he wasn't there for me anymore to change. Like I would be at school at a certain time, go to sleep at a certain time, so much time on your phone. Because as a dad and as a leader, I felt like I knew if you do these tasks, it's going to put you in a position to be successful. That was my logic. But I wasn't taking into account that he was feeling pressured into a box, and that caused him to rebel against my leadership. So I had to focus on my own leadership and own ability to listen and connect with where he was at and make my decisions for him, still with high expectations, but from the space of where is he at? What's the next step that he needs to go? And when I moved out here, I didn't know exactly. I mean, we had kind of rebuilt things some, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to go with the courts. And like, if he was just going to come over here and be like, no, like, I don't want to, I'm not going to dad's, and then, have it be, oh, wow, I just left my entire job. I left everything to strike out. But that's part of, the faith science, having faith in God and faith in my own leadership, my own abilities, and that God has called us to be fathers. And even when it's hard, continuing to lean into who we are as men and who we are as dads. And if we focus on the leadership and how we can improve ourselves, then it really allows our kids to follow that same lead, focusing on themselves instead of other people.
Okay, so you make this move from Eugene to Redmond, which is
Yes.
this little small town 2.5 hours away. And so you begin to reconnect with your son and kind of figure out a different way of being a father, I guess.
Yes, it was a shift. And Jerry, to be honest, it wasn't a huge shift as much as, people hear it, they think it's like this crazy transformation. It was a few little pieces that I was missing. And I think that's the big thing. If you're a dad and you're struggling, it's probably not a overhaul of how you operate. It's probably a few tweaks that need to be made. And so really it came down to really listening and being patient and understanding where he was at and not jumping to conclusions really fast. And when I got here, he was really struggling with marijuana every day. And that's when we got it, said, hey, it doesn't seem like even though it seemed like it was pretty bad, it didn't seem like he was needing rehab or some crazy program. But I said, you need to start taking good care of your body and get you into martial arts. Get you into something. I wanted to get into something, and he chose martial arts. So, and Muay Thai. So we got him into that, and that's kind of built throughout the last, coming up on 2 years of him training this winter.
Okay. So you are helping him, but there's a difference between you helping your son and figuring out this different form of leadership and now kind of saying, hey, I need to go help other dads. So you must have seen, I guess, the same problem out here among other families as well.
Yeah. So a lot of the dads that I work with who feel their teenagers rebelling or pushing back, it's a similar thing where they've been successful. They've taken good care of their body. They've taken good care of their finances. They know obviously we have this wisdom as dads. For me, my son was born when I was 18. So I'm 35. Most dads are probably a little older. Let's just say even 40 years old to make a round number. You have 40 years of experience in the world. You've seen things, you know what works. And so it's easy to feel like you pick up a remote control like on an Xbox and you can start to I know the moves that you need to do to make it, but really they're their own character. And so there's a balance between giving them the parameters to be the main character in their own journey, make some mistakes, but also do it from the space that they're making the mistakes, they're having the wins, so they can really take ownership of it and not feel like they're being controlled by their dad. That's the biggest thing that I see is the dads haven't experienced, because most of the time when we grow up, whether it's a boss or our own dads, the way that we're led is you show up at 8 a.m. and here's a list of all the things that needs to get done. Go.
Right.
Right? Doesn't matter if it's at school, doesn't matter if it's at a work site. Like, that's the typical style of leadership. And with our own kids, if we deploy that strategy for, let's just say, 15 years, and then after 15 years, they get tired of it, they're going to start to push back. So I help dads kind of manage that and find the right balance of how to still transfer what's important to their family and to their kids and to their wives, but do it in a way that's leading and not pushing.
Okay. So these are these general principles that you just mentioned wives as well. So this is also
Yeah.
something where you're talking about as husbands, how you would maybe need to change how you're leading your wife as well as your children. Those are
Yes.
those general principles there.
Yes. Yes. So the principles can transfer over. It's a little different how you play it, because obviously, a 10-year-old leading a 10-year-old is a lot different than leading your wife, who might be, let's just say 35.
Right.
She's developed a lot more skills and autonomy, but there's still some of the principles of leading by example, the same principles of listening, understanding where they're at, where they're wanting to go, helping them uncover the blocks for themselves, as opposed to just telling them what to do.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so when people hear this idea of leadership, they are generally thinking, okay, I get to tell everybody what to do. You're
Right.
basically saying, no, that's not how you should be trying to think about this.
Yeah, there's a shift in mindset of what is it that, as a leader, if you're leading a football team, this is where family leadership is completely different than anywhere else. If you're leading a football team, when I was with the Ducks, everybody had the same goal, from the equipment manager to the strength coaches, head coach, quarterback, wideouts. Everybody had the goal to perform their best on Saturday. Everything was moving towards that. Whatever role we had, it was all moving towards helping the team win. It's different as a family, because opposed to we're all moving in the same direction, we're helping our family find their own direction. We're helping them understand what it is, the target that they want to move towards. So it's not our own target. It's helping them find the target for themselves. So it's a very different aspect of leadership that a lot of times is overlooked. And if we dress it the same as we address how we lead a company or a classroom, it could be detrimental for the long-term growth of our kids, because they just learn to be a follower as opposed to looking and listening to their own heart and what God's calling them to do.
Okay, so this idea of leading and being a father, how does your faith, uh, how do you use that to guide how you're making these decisions? Because I guess
Yes.
the answer here is not go read like the self-help books and like figure out what they're telling you to do as a father.
Right.
My guess would be that's not probably the way that's going to get you where you want to be
Right.
as a leading father.
The faith is actually the foundation. There are 5 layers of the forge, call it, of our leadership pyramid. And FORGE, each of them is a different principle. And the base of the whole pyramid is faith. And there are 3 levels of faith we talk about. Number 1, you have to have faith in God that he has not called you to be a father by accident. That you're not just happen to fall into it. There's a movie I was talking about with my wife called Up, where everything just happens to this guy by accident. A balloon accidentally goes up into this building. My kids were watching this the other day, and
Okay.
he just happens to, like, this kid happens to walk into his house and join him on this journey. They happen to find this, like, everything just kind of happens by circumstance. So the first step is understanding it's not just by accident. We're here on purpose. There's a reason deeper than ourselves that we are here to guide our kids. And that trust in God, that if we listen to what he's calling us to do, he's going to move us in the right direction. The second piece is faith in our ability to develop skills as a leader. It's not saying you've got every skill that you need, but it's saying, I know that if I work on this skill, I will become proficient. I have the capacity to be a great leader. If you're like, man, I'm just being this dad's just not for me, like, you've already lost, right? You've already lost. So
Yeah.
having that frame in mind is the second level of faith in yourself. And then faith in God, faith in yourself. And the last one is faith in your family, faith in your kids, that they have the capacity to make things happen. I've had times where even with my own family, we're working with one of the kids and they're really struggling. It's really, whether it's my 4-year-old or my 16-year-old or my 2-year-old, they're struggling with something, and they're just not getting it. Maybe this just isn't for them. So if we adopt a attitude of apathy, or that they don't have what it takes, if you've ever had a coach who said, man, this kid doesn't got it, doesn't have it, you get like how much harder it is to overcome that feeling of, man, my dad, my mom, they don't think I have what it takes to ride a bike, to make it to school on time, to talk to the girl, whatever the problem is that they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have faith in our kids' ability to perform, it's going to be really hard to progress them, because we're going to be in a space of doubt. And I don't remember how many times it is. I know it's dozens of times Jesus mentions, do not be afraid. And the opposite of do not be afraid is live in faith, not in fear. And if we live in the space of fear and doubt, we're never going to be able to achieve. I mean, I love this because faith science, the science behind it is, when the brain is in a space of fear, the amygdala, the front part of the brain that's responsible for more complex thoughts, starts to shut down, and our ability to perform goes down significantly. When you're operating on faith, like, I know I can do this. And if I use the example of my daughters cracking eggs. If they crack an egg and they don't get it, and they come back and they do it again and they don't get it, they're like, I know that if I keep doing this, I'll get it. They will get it. But if they like, I'm never going to get it, Dad, then they won't. But it's just a matter of timing and pressure. And if you do it over and over and over, eventually you'll get it. But having that faith that they will get it transfers over to them. So faith in God, faith in ourselves, and faith in our kids. Those are the three principles of faith.
Yeah, since you're working with all of these dads, I'm sure there are dads that are like, okay, forget about the faith part. I just like, show me the thing I need to just say to my son to get him to listen. So how
Yes.
much of a struggle is that for you to say, no, this is the main thing. You've got to figure this faith part out first before we
Yes.
can get into any principles.
Yes. Most of the time I kind of screen that out to make sure that they're ready before we like really drop into a deep program together. But I will say, I talk about content versus context, and content is the thing we say, like, how was your day? Right? So for example, I've had a client that was a police officer, and he'd be like, how's your day? Completely different, same question, completely different energy. So I use that example in that story because if you say the thing, but you don't have the right tonality, inflection, and spirit behind it, it's going to land completely differently than if you're saying it from a space of of love and ownership and authority.
Okay, so you have to kind of start with that faith foundation with guys, faith in
Yes.
God, faith in that you can do this, and faith in your family that they can do this. And once you go from there, then you have these other parts to this framework where you have the ORGE. Can you talk a little bit about those other parts?
Sure. The next level is ownership. So ownership is whatever the results are that we get in our family and for ourselves, we have to take ownership over them. So if something doesn't go right culturally, we blame a circumstance. We blame the other party politically. Um, we blame the traffic. We blame whatever it might be. And it's really easy to see when our kids are doing it. Oh, like, well, it's because of my teacher. Like, don't worry about your teacher. Like, you got to take, right? But it's very different. We say, if we're taking ownership over ourselves first, and that's waking up in the morning and training, that's taking care of the house and making sure it's clean, like doing your own chores before we're asking the kids to do there. It adds a level of you're someone who takes ownership over the results. And even when things don't go right, I'm always saying, like, okay, how could I have done this differently as a leader? What's a little pivot that I could have made that would have put everybody else in position? How could I have communicated things better? So that's the next level, is ownership.
Okay.
And when you meet somebody that takes ownership over their results, it allows you to respect them at a higher level. And that's going into the next one.
Yeah, so the ownership part, that's interesting. Like, so again, these principles are not just for fathers with kids, but I'm sure it goes with like spouses as well. Where I think about the Genesis 3 story where um, Adam and Eve both eat the fruit, and as soon as God comes to Adam, he's like, "Yeah, that woman you gave me, like she, there was like zero ownership there. It's like he's
Yes.
blaming everybody." And you're saying, okay, if you want to be a leadership father, if you want to be a leadership husband, then you can't do that. Things went wrong on your watch. You take ownership and figure out what we need to be doing to make it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that could be really hard because I had a dad who had a really broken relationship with his daughter, who was an adult
Mhm.
or is an adult. And when he went back and talked to her about some of the things that happened between them when when she was 15, 16 years old, and say, that led to her pushing back and making some bad decisions later on. He had to go back and say, hey, I didn't deal with this the right way. I apologize. Like, I've got to do better. And it totally shifted and released. It was like a pressure release, and it allowed for a whole next level of deeper connection. There was a lot of weeks of working to build up to that space where he was ready to take that full ownership. But once he did, and I talked to her about it, it changed the entire energy with their interactions. Yeah, ownership is paramount. And it really comes down to, before we can lead anybody else, we have to be able to lead ourselves. And that's what the first two levels are all about, leading ourselves.
Right. So after ownership, you say that if you can own your circumstances and own the results, then that leads into the next one. So that next one is
Yes.
respect.
Yes. So there's two levels. There's other levels as well, but the two main levels of respect is action respect, what we've done as men to earn that respect. So a lot of ownership, when we take ownership, that earns action respect. Or if you have an athlete that you respect, like for whatever reason right now, Emmitt Smith is coming to mind. When I was growing up, he was an athlete I loved, right? I respected him. Didn't know him at all, but I respected him because I knew about how hard he worked and how he performed, and I respected who he was as a man. That's the first layer for us as dads, is we need to be a man that's worth following. So once we've done that, level 1 is that action respect of being the person that's worth following. Level 2 is the connection respect, being able to have the interactions, the conversations, understanding of what our kids are going through, and earning respect through being that person that's there and being that person that knows what's going on. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna. So those two layers of respect. Um, so you need to be the person, and then you earn respect through connecting with other people.
Yes.
And so you said, did you say those were the first two levels of
Those
respect?
are the two basic. There's another one that's a little bit more complex, and that's maintaining respect. And that's when our authority is challenged.
Mm,
So if you can be a great you be a great man and work out and take care of your finances and be doing all the right things and have a great relationship with your teenage daughter and understand what's going on in her life and knowing her ups and downs and go and play golf with her every week. And she still might challenge your authority. She still might try to stay out later than she's supposed to. So maintaining respect goes into when our authority is challenged. For example, in our house, a simple one is we only eat in the kitchen because when our kids and even adults start to eat in the living room, the bedrooms, we just get crumbs and stuff everywhere. So it's like we have a big enough kitchen dining room area. It's like that's the eating space. Keep it food in there. So if my son or somebody even my daughters are eating outside the kitchen and I just let it slide, that's not gonna, they might like me, but they're not gonna respect me because they know that I don't have the backbone to back up what the expectations are.
so then you need to. So what are is this a so what are the principles here? What do you do to is this regaining or is this maintaining? What do we do to in that situation? Your kid eats outside of the kitchen when they know they're supposed to. What's the principle there that you're applying?
That I would teach.
Right.
I look at it as 3 levels: early, middle, late. I got this bug and flying around here.
Okay.
Early is like, hey, set the expectation that is clear and let me make sure that they know why it is. Because kids want to know why, especially teenagers. They want to know why. Why does it matter if there's a problem? Why does it matter if I eat in the kitchen or eat in the living room? So they know why, right? Then middle is like a early, like you see it. Hey, remember, eat in the kitchen, food, kitchen. And it's subtle, but it's always better to make it as brief as possible. With those redirections, if it's a really long, like, oh my gosh, you're eating in the living room again, and I've told you 3 times, and every day that this is a problem, and I can't believe it, and it's like long and drawn out, kids are like, I get it. I'm supposed to go in the kitchen. So if you're like, sometimes it could just be a look, like, I know if you're listening to this, you might see, but you kind of like turn your head and squint, like, that might be enough to have the kids like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember. So I like to play the game of what's the least amount of words that I can say to help them redirect back to the right on track. So early, middle, and then late is like if you wake up and there are crumbs all over the place, then I'd be like, hey, there are crumbs here. Saw you eating. Like you're the only one that would have been eating. Like everybody's gonna like vacuum the chair or whatever it is. Like something. I don't want it to be a consequence that it's got to be adequate for the crime. Mm-hmm. You spilled on the chair. Vacuum the chair. Like that's gonna take you about 5-10 minutes. It's gonna be kind of inconvenient, but it's not like just eating in the kitchen in the first place would have been more convenient than having to vacuum the chair.
Right.
But I've seen parents push it where it's like, oh, you're going to vacuum the whole living room, and like you're trying to like make it this really heavy consequence, and then you think, man, if it's a really heavy consequence, there's no way they're going to do it because they're just going to want to avoid that completely. But the truth is, they will probably at some point rebel and test the boundary no matter what. So the easier it is for you to enforce, the better. Like that's a big thing with boundaries, is like you've got to make them clear and then easy for you to enforce.
Okay, so you establish this respect, and so then what's the G? What comes after that?
G is groundbreaking adventure. And this is actually where the most important work happens.
Okay.
So adventure could be as simple as going on a bike ride. Like, there's a little farm that's like maybe a half mile from here. We'll go and do a night walk around sunset with me and my 2-year-old and 4-year-old, and we'll go down to the animals and ride back. And that's just like it's a little adventure that we go on. Sometimes we'll do a field trip and we'll go skiing, and that's a little bigger adventure. Go camping. But the times where we can get out of our comfort zone and let the lesson, the challenge, do the teaching. So if I take my daughter skiing, there's hopefully very little that I actually have to teach her. Give her a few little bits of directions, but then she's the one that's challenging herself and pushing herself to go down the hill and seeing how she can turn. If she crashes or she ends up a ways off from where the ski lift is to go back up, like, okay, that didn't work. Now I'm not the one telling her that what she did didn't work. It's the mountain. And the same thing goes with my son. He loves Muay Thai and martial arts. So our adventure a lot of times has to do with that. And embarking on those, just Tuesday, Thursday nights, going out to MMA, going out to Muay Thai, and having a class. You're going to, as you go on adventures with your kids, you're going to introduce new, there's a whole chapter in my book on I think I have 7 or 8 benefits of going on adventures with your kids. You're going to meet other guides that are going to be influential on your kids and positive.
Okay, so what would you it's groundbreaking adventure.
Yes.
You said the most important work is done here.
Yes.
So is that like the main benefit of the adventure part?
So when you have common adventure, let's just say I don't surf, but let's say there's a dad that surfs, and he loves surfing, and he's taught his daughter how to surf from a young age. Now, when she's 16 and she wants to go on an adventure and go surfing, they have a common bond and they have a common skill that they can share together. All of a sudden, the amount of time that dad has with his 16-year-old daughter is significantly more because they have a common adventure together. There are a lot of dads that don't have that. They just, we eat together. We have dinner. I go to her school plays, but I'm like, what is it that you do alongside, shoulder to shoulder? Where is it that they can watch how you operate? So, for example, when my son and I go training and do martial arts, I can focus on myself and just train, skip rope the way I skip rope, fight the way I fight. And he's going to not observe me like watching my dad. I'm watching what to do and what I'm supposed to do, but he's going to observe me and like, okay, that's who my dad is. That's how he operates. He's able to finish. He's able to, he's in shape. He finishes what he starts. All of those things. He holds through to his commitments. Earlier this summer, there was a time where it was hot and all of Charles's friends were bailing out of training and working out. And, it was 105 degrees. And I said, hey, I'll be there. Let's go. And so it just says hey, what's your brand as a dad? And you're able to really have more time, and also with that time influence your kids in a more subtle way so that they can watch and observe you instead of just feeling like when they're with dad, it's like being with a police officer that's telling them what to do or they expect. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about college. Let's talk about your grades, whatever it might be. It's a different level.
Okay. So it sounds like most of these are athletic. So it's skiing or it's Muay
Yeah,
Thai, or can you give some examples of, for the non-athletes out
sure,
there,
sure.
can you give some
It,
examples of some non-athletic adventures that
adventures.
dads might be able to have?
You could have an adventure starting a business. You could have, hey, okay, you want to start. I'm just going to use an example like lemonade stand, car wash, whatever it is. That could be an adventure that you guide your kids with. It could be building a tree house. It could be working on an old car. There are adventures. I do think it's important to break away from technology, but even with that, you can. Is it physical to build a tree house? Yes, but it's not
Yeah.
like you don't have to
Right.
be a great athlete to do that.
But you're saying like Fortnite is not an adventure, or like Madden or
Yeah,
2K is not an adventure.
it could be a starting point.
Okay.
If you're like, man, that's what my kids does. Is he, and Charles and I'll just use this example. I coached his football team. So then there's a little bit more of a depth of like, oh, we're playing Madden. I know some dads, maybe they're across the country and that's like really how they bond is doing that. And I don't think it's bad. I do think that for you to set the example of someone who is getting outside of the matrix, outside of just being behind a screen, I think it's important to find outside of the real world. If your kids, yeah, it's not a bad starting point, but I would encourage as much as you can to find stuff, other options as well outside of the screen.
Okay, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
okay, so you set groundbreaking adventure, you do that with your kids. So what's the
Yes.
E? What's the top of the pyramid there?
E is expectations.
Okay.
What are your expectations? What are your standards that you hold in your family? And that is the most difficult one. It is, I don't want to say it's easy to enjoy your time with your kids and like do fun things, but then there's also the point, especially with teenagers, where you have to draw lines and boundaries. So that I just talk about identifying what your values are and creating expectations that are as clear as possible with as little rules as possible. If you have 12, 13 rules that you have, that's too many. Like get it down to where it's like 5 or less. Like we have a rule, like my favorite rule is respect all family members at all times. Very easy to follow and it encompasses a lot. So if my son and wife are talking to each other, which Megan is Charles' stepmom, so there's a little different dynamic there that can create tension. If my daughter is talking to the dog, if my daughter is taking a toy from my other daughter, like all of these things are encompassed as, are you being respectful to the other family members? If yes, great. If no, then there's going to be an issue. There's going to be consequences.
Okay. So like so you're talking about basically setting some general expectations like respect, obedience, truth, these kind of these things where you understand what they are. We don't have to have every little thing uh,
Listed out.
listed out, right? Don't do this thing, don't do that thing, don't do that thing. But and again, it sounds like it's a positive. You're talking about positive rules rather than kind of a thou shalt not rules in this
Right.
case as well.
Right. And I think that's important. If you see a sign, I mean, just thinking about, right? Like if somebody saw a sign that was like, no alcohol beyond this point or no smoking, like automatically they're thinking about smoking and alcohol. Or
Right.
don't fish in this pond. Like there was a story about a pond with koi fish and a pool in a hotel area, like a hotel courtyard, and there was never any problem with anybody fishing for pond in this pond. And they put up a sign that said no fishing. And all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, I could fish in there." Like they didn't thought about it. They say don't do it.
Right.
So if we can focus on, this was a lesson from our father-son retreat. We're riding through we're riding through Central Oregon on a bike ride, mountain bike, and on this ride, the guides talk about stumps that are going to be in the road, and they say, "Hey, when you see this, when you see a stump, you want to identify it, and then what do you think they'd say to do? To look at the stump or look to where you want to go?"
Well, you should look, to where you want to go. I think they say that about skiing too, that you focus on the path or not the
Yes.
trees.
Yes. So it's focus on where you want to go. Focus on the target, not the obstacle. A lot of people focus on the obstacle, and then at that time, you end up hitting it.
Right.
Like you're so focused on this problem that's with this girl at school. All you can think about is the problem with this girl at school. And every time you think about it, you're hitting the stump, as opposed to, okay, what is the result that you want? I want to go here. I want to get better at wrestling. I want to get better, whatever it is. Okay, this is a problem. I know that it's there, but I'm still going to keep my focus and my attention on my target.
Okay. All right. So you've got faith, you got ownership,
Yes.
respect, groundbreaking, adventure, and then we
Yes.
end with expectations. You said that's the hardest part. Most people, what's the problem that fathers are having here? Is it that they tend to want to have 15 rules, or is it they can't figure out what their 3 or 5 rules are?
Yeah.
What
I
makes
say
it
it's
so
the
hard?
hardest. It's probably the hardest for me. I naturally, I was based really in expectations and standards. And so as my son is very naturally wants to create his own expectations, and I try to have as few rules as possible. But there's still finding that balance of having a communication with your teenager and open and like, okay, yeah, I want to have, I like to be like bamboo, where it has some flexibility, but it also is very firm and hard. So it can stretch, like be home by 9. Hey, he calls at 7:00. Hey, this is going to be going on. Can I be home at 9:30? Okay, cool. But what's not as great is 8:45. Hey, I'm not going to be home till 9:30. It's like, now that's where it's like, okay, I don't want to be the asshole and like, you were home 30 minutes late. This is the problem. You called 15 minutes ahead of time. Cars, and it's like back into feeling like, there's control. So they need to know that that's the balance of being flexible and listening, but also being firm with there's some things that don't move.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So I have come across your podcast. I'm kind of interested in what current projects and stuff you're working on right now. I don't know if the podcast is the thing you're really excited about right now, but what are you working on right now? What projects and stuff that you are excited about?
Yes, great question. We just launched our online course,
Okay.
which I think probably later in the episode we'll talk about our leadership quiz. You
Yeah.
take the leadership quiz. You got you get an opportunity to get the course. So the course is out. It's kind of going to go through each of these levels that we talked about today, as well as why like the psychology behind why teenagers rebel, how to reverse it if it's not going in the right direction, like how to actually set up your adventures and understand what your kids are needing. And then it also goes into technology and like how to manage technology at the different ages and some of the science behind why kids are struggling with it right now.
Okay.
But I've also got, that's kind of just finished up. So I'm excited and pumped on that. And then the book is going to be coming out in the next few months.
Okay.
I've got 3 chapters left that I have to write in that and then editing. So I'm looking at November 1st for a release date for that.
Okay. Does the book have a title yet?
It's yes, and so it's either going to be a dad who leads or dads who lead, something like that. Right now it's dads who lead. I just might change it so it's focused on like, hey, this is your journey, like the dad who leads your specific journey.
Okay. Okay, so you mentioned the leadership quiz. So I
Yes.
was kind of looking up your stuff
Yes.
and I took the leadership quiz, but again, it's designed for fathers. So if you're interested, I I don't remember how I came across it, but is there a specific URL to
Yeah. If you
tell
go
people
to
if they want to take?
dadswholead.com,
Okay.
that's the best way. It'll be right there on the front homepage to
Okay,
take the
yeah.
quiz.
Yeah, so I take the dadswholead.com leadership quiz, and I don't have any kids, so I'm going through and trying to answer it based on what I anticipate in terms of being a father, or
Yes.
even just how maybe with my nieces and nephews and stuff that I do with kids now. And so I'm apparently my leadership profile is the admiral. I don't know what the different types are, but maybe you can tell us what the different types are, and then maybe we go through my profile and say like
Sure.
what as an example.
Sure. So 3 styles: Admiral, Mastermind, and the Guardian. And
Okay.
the Admiral, I'm also naturally an Admiral. Um, so Admirals are action based. They like to do things. If there's a party going on and there's a game, or then over here on the side there are people talking, they're going to go play the game. They want to be doing something. They want to be building something. That's where they're comfortable. So a lot of us as men don't shine across from the kitchen table talking with our kids. They shine when we're out doing, like, going hunting or going on a hike or doing some type of adventure with our kids, side by side, alongside in the car. Um, the deep conversations don't come as naturally for us. So that's the admiral style. You're typically, admirals are very precise. They're very hardworking and they know exactly the things that need to get done.
Okay. So what are
Yeah.
the other two?
The other two, the next one is the guardian, and the
Okay.
guardian, the admiral is very actually pretty intentional and like able to listen to themselves and what they need to do. The guardian is really great at listening to other people. They're good. They're especially when kids are young. Guardians have a lot of fun as a dad because they're able to drop in and be at their kids' level and understand them and know what's going on and know their favorite cartoon characters. And um, guardians are able to do a great job of that connection side of respect and understanding what their kids are going through and why. And they'll do anything to help their kids out of a tough situation, because they just want to be there to support. And
Okay.
they,
So then the mastermind is the last one, and what is
yes,
it
the
about that?
mastermind is, you can typically people are naturally either a guardian or an admiral. But what we find is admirals reach a point where they know, okay, the most important thing for creating success is not just doing what I want to do, but also listening to the whole team. So when you get to a phase of your leadership where you're like, okay, I know it's important to be driven for my own and lead by example, but to be the best leader that I can be, I need to be able to also tap into that other side and listen to what's going on.
So it's a
So
mixture of the two, I guess.
yeah, it's an ability to have range in both sides. And natural guardians can also become this way as well. And they understand, like, okay, yeah, naturally I connect well with my kids, but I also know and see that it's important to not just sit around and talk, but also take action. So it's someone who understands the importance of both sides. And there's a lot of like other, when you take the quiz, there's other science behind why. Like, for example, when I ask how many kids do you have, if someone has 4 or more kids, that means that their family or their wife selected them 4 times to have kids. Like things have got to be going pretty well with the first 3 and your leadership to be selected like, oh, let's go ahead and do a 4th. So things like that are indicators that they're all just because you're one in one question, you score in a certain way doesn't mean everything, but each one is a little bit of an indicator of which style that you sit in under.
Okay. So my power question here is, how can I get my family involved in creating the plan? So I guess that's referring to this idea that there can be a natural tendency to not connect as
Yes.
well to the kids or to a wife as you should. So you need to be
Yeah.
kind of shoring that up somehow, or thinking about how I can involve them in that leadership and not kind of just unilaterally, I guess, make decisions or create the plan.
Yes. So naturally for us as admirals, we're like, we know what works. We know like the system. Let's go. Let's roll with it. Like this would be so much faster if we just did this. Everybody. So slowing down, like when we did paintball on a father-son retreat, that dads that were admirals came in and were like, hey, all right, here's the plan. Especially dads that had been in the military. And then, I'd come be like, okay, has Braden have a chance to lead, like be the director of where people go? Oh, no. Okay. All right. Braden, son, this time you're going to be the leader of our squad and you're going to decide where people go and why. And maybe we lose that game, but the point is not to win every single paintball game. The point is to explore the leadership and the experience and how we can improve and what went well and what didn't go well. So that's where we can have to let go a little bit control to have that development, to have our people around us also be able to develop that skill to take the lead.
Okay. So I'm a single guy. So I've mentioned this before. So I'm not
Yes.
married, no kids yet. So what advice would you give me if I'm preparing to be a dad who leads, if I'm preparing to be a leader of my wife and my children?
Yes.
What kinds of things should I be thinking about now and in preparation for that?
It's a great position to be in. It's all about finding your purpose and your groundbreaking adventures. Because by the time you have kids, let's just use the example. You know how to surf, you know how to shoot a bow, you know how to change the oil, you know how to do all this stuff that you enjoy. There will be so many different options for you to try fun things with your kids because you have this cool skill set. You'll be, I don't like to use the term cool dad, but you'll be the cool dad and they're like, okay, we're going to go skiing. I can go skiing. If we're going to go down to the water, there's stuff I can do there. Like, where are we going to go? Where's the playground that God's blessed us with that we're going to go today? And that was what I say is like, if you don't have kids yet and you want to prepare to be a dad, the best thing you can do is go out and have fun and try lots of different shit that you might one day be able to teach your kids how to do.
Okay. And so we didn't talk about this, but you're getting closer to the end.
Yeah.
You mentioned becoming a dad at 18, and
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about that and what the struggles were there? Because you didn't have this framework in place yet, and so what are the
Yeah.
things that what were the struggles there, becoming a dad that early?
For me, the working part came easy.
Mm.
So my son was born when I was 18. He was with a woman. I selected a girlfriend in high school that was not a long-term partner. And so raising Charles with her is often some of the toughest challenges. So I guess here's the big thing. When I was 18, I guess a benefit of it was I didn't have time to go and develop bad habits 18, 19 years old because I was working from the gym. Like a lot of my friends be out partying during the weekdays, like all the time. And I had to really be on purpose with what I was doing. Um, being the young dad, the hardest thing was I would work and provide, and I was going to school and all that, but not being able to provide the family framework and the core experience as the leader of the home. As he got, I saw him very little when he was like 1 to 3. I mean, I had time with him, but he was an infant, so it wasn't as much. But not being the leader of the home. Now with my daughters, my wife and I have developed a home, and we know what matters to us, and like we're so much in alignment with our faith and what matters to us in communication. Who you choose to have kids with, I feel like, is even more important than when. So I guess that's kind of my takeaway from it. That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're getting close to the hour mark, so we'll go ahead and kind of go into some of those to what I call my final 4 questions.
Let's do
The
it.
first one is what book you currently find yourself recommending to other people right now, other than the Bible or one of your own books?
I've got a bookshelf over here. The most common one that I refer dads to when they start our program is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Okay.
And that really helps frame the power of like, there are a lot of layers that happen when we take extreme ownership, but that really goes into detail of how many benefits and how essential it is that we do that in our journey.
Okay. Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. I've heard great things about it. Haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but
At least read the first chapter. I
okay, the first
say
chapter.
the first like the whole book is great, but like 90% of it you're going to get out of that first chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could probably do that. All right. Is there an interesting quote or scripture you've been thinking a lot about lately?
Yes. The scripture, and it was challenged by our pastor last weekend to memorize it, and I haven't memorized it yet, but Jesus talks in Mark, I believe it's Mark 12, that it's like, I'm sending you forth as sheep among wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. And shrewd is like as sharp or like dangerous. So God has called us to not just be, I think this is a big misconception for us as men and as Christians, for us to be soft and caring, which is important to have that range, but we also have to have the range to be hard and tough and physical. And that's not celebrated. So it's okay to celebrate the toughness, because your kids need to be tough. Yes, they need to be sensitive and caring, which is important, and that's the feminine, but they also need to have the courage to do the hard thing when hard things need to happen. And so being as shrewd as snakes and as innocent doves, having that range, that's a big calling to have that range on both sides. But it's one of my favorite teachings from Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about him speaking of meekness in the Sermon on the Mount. And generally, people think of meek as being weak, but his idea is this idea of strength under control. So you are able to be hard, you are able to be tough, but it's also under control. You're not abusing people and doing everything. So that's a good quote or a good scripture there. Okay. What is something you believe or you yeah, what's something you believe that many, if not most, other people don't? You have an unconventional belief.
Oh, my unconventional belief is that men are the leaders of the home.
Okay.
And I hear a lot now about partnership, and that we need to like work as a team with their wife, and they're both the head of a house, and that's all true and great. But there can only be one captain of the ship. And when I say leadership, I don't mean a ruler. I mean a leader who is someone who is able to be composed and make the tough decisions and guide not just ourselves, not just our kids, but our wives as well. So I believe that the man is the leader of the home, and with that comes a lot of responsibility to develop the skill of leadership. And with that, there's a misconception that women don't want to be led, they want to be in charge. And everybody's different. And I can say that when women feel that the man is capable and has the skills to be able to lead, it's actually quite the relief and they enjoy it. Like the example of, where do you want to go to dinner? Asking your wife, where do you want to go to dinner? Like, as opposed to like, I know what you like and I made reservations and I'm taking you to dinner. Like, that's leadership. It's not just I'm doing whatever I want because I want to do it, but I know I understand you and I'm able to take what I understand and make a decision that's going to help sweep you off the feet, even if we've been together for 10 years.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was talking to some people from church, and I was talking to these two couples, and we began to talk about where they were going to go to eat, and the ladies were talking about how they get into these huge arguments about wanting to go to somewhere when the husband comes and says, okay, where do you want to eat? And the ladies were getting so angry, and I couldn't understand it, but like I guess that's what you're describing here, that
Yes.
it was just, you could just see their faces turning red, and they were just, she's like, I hate when that happens, where you're asking me to pick where we go to eat. And so
yes. And
it was,
ultimately what's happening is, what it's saying to our wife at the subconscious level is, I don't understand you well enough to make a decision. Could you please do the legwork of leading us so that I don't have to?
right.
And so it's subtle, and there's a lot that we feel like a lot of guys like, oh, I want to be nice and I want to like let my wife pick the meal, because as that guys we would love to pick, but if you just pick it, even if she doesn't like it, there's probably gonna be something on the menu that she likes, and then she'll feel like, okay, cool, well, like it's kind of like sweeping into adventure. Women like the unknown a lot more than the guys, so it's a subtle difference, but having that range can be impactful for sure for your nights.
Okay. Yeah, this is not a popular belief in 2024. So I'm sure you get some flack about that
Yeah.
from time to time. Okay. You got kids. What's a piece of wisdom that you plan to leave behind for your kids after you're gone?
And as you asked that question, the thing that popped up in my mind is being the main character. You're the main character in your own story. It's not political beliefs, or it's not like what's in the news. It's not what's in the politics. It's not what's going on in the community. All the noise that can be going on, you're still the main character. So if you think of someone like, thinking of a Star Wars character like Luke Skywalker, right? You drop him into a tough situation, he's going to find a way to have a positive attitude and come out on the, he's going to make it a great story that he's coming out on top. So regardless of the situation you're in, you are the one writing the story. Life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that'll be great for the kids. So if somebody wants to get in touch with the Leadership Dad, how do they do that? Is that dadswholead.com? Is that the best place to find you?
Yeah, go to dadswholead.com. I am on Instagram. If you send me a message there, I'll get back to you. You can follow me on Facebook. My email is thomas@theleadershipdad.com. So that's another great way to reach out. And I believe that if you're driven enough to reach out and find me, you're going to find a way to make it happen. So,
Okay, that makes sense. Any parting words for the audience?
just Jerry, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I love the faith science concept, and It's a blessing as always.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Really appreciate the leadership dad, Thomas Pfanner, coming on with us today. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep the faith.